Hey, Dave, nice to see you.
Likewise, Coffee, how are you doing?
I like your house.
Yeah. Uh,
Understated.
okay.
Oh, that reminds me. Actually, I should turn our video off because we're just sitting here in the dark.
Hey, we can just see
Is
us in
this
the
look
dark.
creepy or what?
Okay. Alrighty. Oh, we got more people. Here we go. John Durr. Looks like our speaker is in the house. Alrighty. So yeah, we're
Hello, Bill.
uh-oh, Austin. Okay.
I can't hear you. Maybe I should. Let's see here.
Okay. Copy that.
Someone say something.
I'm here
there you
for
are.
you.
How's my audio?
I can hear you great.
Well, that's the important thing. As long as Dave can hear me.
Yeah. Okay, I just got to get one more person the instructions how to get in. Okay. Reply. We have more. Got one. Jerry is here. Okay. And okay, just giving Austin the instructions. Okay. Okay.
Excellent.
Okay, I heard more. Oh, there's Kovan.
I remember Kovan. Hey,
Oh
Kovan.
yeah, and there's Marilyn.
There's Marilyn.
It's like old home week.
During a pandemic.
Okay, well that's it for now.
Okay.
So hey, Ben, are you gonna have like a PowerPoint
I'm not. I'm going to go off the seat of my cuff of my pants.
off the cuff of your shirt there? Okay, that's fine.
Somebody did say that she had sent a request and she wasn't sure whether you got it or not. It could have been a few minutes ago. I'm just saying you might want to check the email. I just posted it on Facebook.
Okay, I just did check. I got one from Austin Meady. Oh, I think Marilyn. How'd she get into that one? Marilyn got into the CESE meeting. How did she do that?
I
don't know.
I'm sorry, I was trying to connect to NMSR and I couldn't find the link.
But I hadn't even. I did send it out, didn't I? Okay.
Yeah, you did, but
oh dear. Okay.
I accidentally clicked on that one instead of this one. Sorry.
Well, I make it so I don't start taping until I start the meeting. So that's good because it would be taping a week ahead of time. So I'm checking the email and I do not see.
That's fine. I just wanted to just double check.
I'll leave it open and I'll check it every once in a while.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Alrighty. So you're. Oh no! Somebody else is here. Tish Morris is in the house, the virtual reading room. Excellent. So, and we've got one more chat question. Don't show us the seat of your pants. Okay, I'm
yeah, we have reactions. Directed to, but
so I'm going to react to that. There we go. Okay, so our speaker tonight is Ben Radford, and he's associate editor or technical managing editor of the Skeptical Inquirer, and just a sort of all-around skeptical resource. And I could screen share one thing before we get started, and that is, here we go. I'm going to share this text window So Larry Barker called us up, Ben and me, and he's going to do. He wants to lighten it up after a year of COVID. So he's going to show our wacky, weird, and wild investigations that Benjamin and I have helped out on. So I think he's going to do the Roswell UFO and the Aztec UFO and Bigfoot up at UNM. So here's the scheduled Christmas Eve, 4 p.m. That's probably for most people on good old KRQE. And Channel 13 is pretty good about putting their stuff on YouTube. So
They are.
even if you miss it
I've always
at
been impressed by
4
them.
p.m., you can grab it. And if it's on YouTube, you can. Okay, we got an iPhone that is entering the meeting. Okay. Hello, iPhone. So Ben Radford is our speaker, and he's got a new book out. And yes, there it is. But I'm sure you'll tell us how we can order this book.
I will mercilessly mention it. Yes.
And there were a certain number of signed copies. Are those all used up?
Honestly, there's like 3 or 4 left. So if you want one, let me know as soon as possible.
Okay, they're going fast. Okay. All right. Well, without further ado, take it away, Ben.
All right.
You have the comm.
I have the comm. All right. Well, I'm just going to. I don't need to see my ugly mug among all you people, so I'm just going to move that out of the way. And I just want to say hello to Bill and Jerry and Carol and all the folks. I wish I was there. Of course, we all wish we were there, but nothing new there. Yeah. So I just wanted to sort of this is partly informational and partly promotional, mostly hopefully the former. So I do have a new book out, and as I've done for NMSR a couple times, we'll be talking a bit about that. So it is, again, Big If True, Adventures in Oddity. And this is, I think, my 12th or 13th book. And all my books, except for one, have had subtitles. I'm a big fan of subtitles. Bad Clowns is the only book that didn't have a subtitle because, frankly, it didn't need it. I had a long discussion with the people at UNM Press. They're like, "What's it about?" It's about bad clowns, and that was like, we don't need a subtitle. We got it all in there. We don't need to go any further with that one. But in this case, I wanted to sort of do. I like this, the pop culture phrase, big if true. I've always liked that one. And also, of course, the Clara Peller. Do you guys know who Clara Peller is? I'm sure Dave does. Who besides Dave? No one remembers Clara Peller. Well, she was the face behind probably one of the most popular skeptical catchphrases in American advertising history. Where's the beef? That was her. She was the little old lady in the Where's the Beef commercials. I've always been a fan of hers. I always loved those commercials from the 80s. So between Where's the Beef and Big If True, I've always thought these were just fun little phrases. So in doing investigations and skepticism, I've always sort of imagined basically what we do as sort of finding the asterisk, right? Because there are lots of big claims, as you guys know, Bigfoot sighted, homeopathy cures XYZ. And you have to sort of go into the details, the little asterisks, like, well, hold on, if this is true, it's big. If it's not true, if psychic powers don't actually exist, or for example, if aliens didn't really crash at Roswell, or take your pick, then it's not that big because it's not true. And so that's why I wanted to sort of title it that. And just to sort of take you back a bit. So As many of you know, I've been an editor for Skeptical Inquirer for a couple decades now. Here's a recent one: the scientific frauds behind the false vaccine autism claim. Of course, false claims about vaccines are especially problematic these days, as you all know. And I really began writing articles for Skeptical Inquirer, I think maybe 18 or so years ago. And at the time, it was pretty esteemed company, right? There was the late great my friend Randy. Randy occasionally was a columnist for SI, as was Martin Gardner, Joe Nicola, of course, Massimo Polidoro, Massimo Pigliucci, as I call them, the double Massimos. I never call them to their face, so don't tell them I said that. Robert Schaefer, and so on. And so I figured, well, if I was going to add my voice to Skeptical Inquirer, I had to find a niche, right? Because I wasn't writing about medicine. I wasn't writing about UFOs, for example, as Robert Schaefer was. Martin Gardner wrote about everything. he was the polymath. I was fortunate enough to be his editor for several years, and I have some handwritten. He would always type. So I have a handful of typed notes from him that I have retained with his nice little Martin note on it. But I was trying to figure out, okay, well, how am I going to fit into this? And so I decided that what I would try to do was to do a Q&A column, because that had never been done before in Skeptical Inquirer. And so everybody else was sort of doing these longer pieces that were on whatever topic crossed their fancy. You know, Joe would write about ghosts or whatever else. And I said, well, that's fine. I mean, there's fascinating stuff coming out of there, but I was looking for more of a bridge between what the skeptical community and I, as a sort of small, quasi-prominent part of that, was doing, and the broader population, right? So, because I realized that what skeptics consider to be important isn't necessarily what the average people consider to be important. And so I wanted to do not really a Dear Abby skepticism, because that's kind of weird, but sort of I wanted to open it up. And so I was going to invite readers and really just anybody to ask questions. And I was kind of nervous about doing this because, of course, I realized that I might get deluged with people asking me to investigate any number of things that I just didn't have the time or the resources to do. But I soon realized that, number one, I wasn't getting deluged, which was kind of nice. And most of them were actually fairly thoughtful, intelligent queries. Some of them were from journalists. Some of them were just from friends of mine, a couple from family members, friends, and oftentimes, even to this day, I get emails from the public, probably, one or two a week, asking me about, some given thing. And so that was really why I wanted to begin doing the columns, was to sort of bridge this gap between the skeptical community and what everyday ordinary people were doing or thinking about or talking about in the general public. And so, it certainly, when I began the columns, it wasn't because I had any lack of things to do. I mean, I was doing at the time I was editing the Skeptical Briefs newsletter and doing managing editing for Skeptical Inquirer magazine. And really, the last thing I needed to do was to begin writing a column as well, because, that's a whole thing. But I talked to Ken Frazier, who you all know, the longtime editor, and Ken said, yeah, if you want to write a column for the magazine, that'd be great. Just keep it short. Just not literally that short, but it's just, it was like, we have a problem with long columns. If you could keep it to a couple pages, that'd be great. And so I said, I think I can do that. So basically at that point, and again, it's been 15, 18 years now, at that point, I began taking questions and queries from the public, from friends, from journalists, anybody who had some question about something either I had investigated or or they asked me to investigate. And like I said, with the title of the book, these were things that are big if true. Again, if these things are real, if psychic detectives are real, then that's great. You know, they should be employed by the FBI and the local police finding missing persons. I mean, if they can genuinely do these things, then that's wonderful. They need to be supported. On the other hand, of course, if they can't really do these things, if these people are not genuinely predicting the future or finding water with dowsing rods or you know, whatever it is, if people can't really bend metal with their minds, if Bigfoot and Chupacabras really aren't out there, then that too is interesting and worthy of figuring out. And so, you know, my approach to skepticism has always been, these are cool topics, right? These are fascinating topics. They're weird, they're crazy, they're crop circles, they're psychics, they're Bigfoot, they're all these fascinating things, and that they deserve to be genuinely and sincerely investigated. They're not too silly to investigate. They're not crazy. They're not stupid. Oftentimes, they're people they're topics that a lot of people genuinely believe in some cases, have personal experiences with. And so that was sort of the origin of writing Big If True. So again, when I was pulling this book together, I wanted to sort of do a survey of the columns that I'd written in SI, and again, after doing it for so long, of course, it comes every 2 months. So I had lots of material to work with. And so I was trying to sort out what was worth reprinting, what was worth adding and revisiting. And so in the end, I think I have 8 chapters: legends, monsters, ghosts, mysterious powers and places, UFOs, conspiracies, health and medicine, and finally skepticism. So they just sort of broke down kind of into those. There are no hard and fast categories, but I tried to sort of give an overview of what I, as a science-based critical thinking promoting investigator, was trying to do with these sorts of things. Anyway, it's a collection of 70 mysteries from across the spectrum. Some of the mysteries, some of the columns I wrote, they weren't really relevant anymore. Some of them were about products that were not sold anymore. So thankfully, I didn't bother to include that one. So I went through and I tried to sort of pick some of those more interesting ones that I enjoyed researching and writing about, and ones that I thought would have a broader appeal to the general public. So what I'm going to do with the remaining how long do you have? 20 minutes, Dave?
So you could talk for 40 minutes if you want, and then that's when
I'll just
have our donuts, but we don't have
virtual donuts. Normally we have real donuts. Unfortunately,
I got a picture of a donut I can show.
Yeah, virtual donuts, Dave. Thank you for the virtual donuts.
Yeah.
So I thought that I would just sort of pick a handful of cases from the book that I enjoyed doing and that you might be interested in, and after that we'll do a little Q&A if you have any questions, or of course you could always get the book if you're so inclined. The book actually begins with one of my favorite columns that I wrote, which is a woman that contacted me. And she was writing to me because she was distraught because she believed that she was cursed. And I've gotten a handful of these sorts of emails from people over the years, probably a dozen or so. And these are always very difficult to deal with, right? Because they're people who sincerely are reaching out to me as somebody, you know, they saw me on TV, they saw something I wrote, whatever else. One of my Discovery News columns, and they're emailing me seeking help. And usually I can pretty quickly tell, is this a troll? Is this a joke? Are they putting me on? And usually it's pretty clear that no, the person is genuinely frightened. The person is genuinely scared that there's a ghost in their house. The person is genuinely freaking out because they believe that a curse has been put on them and that everything bad that's happening to them is a result of that. And so I've always had difficulty. I've always had to treat these delicately, right? Because my background is in psychology. That's my bachelor's degree from UNM, and so I try and bring psychology to it. So if someone comes to me for help, I want to genuinely help them if I can, and I want to improve their situation, whatever that might be. At the same time, I don't want to reinforce potentially harmful beliefs, right? So I can't ethically use an approach that I know isn't scientifically grounded and that might end up, hurting them in the end. And so, and I'm just going to summarize it quickly. Again, it's the first bit in the book. But so the woman contacted me and she said that that she and I think it was her boyfriend and I think her son had been having lots of domestic fights recently, and she had gone to I think 8 or 10 psychics, and they had all told her that the reason that she's having such problems in her life was that she had an enemy who cursed her. And when you understand the psychology of psychics and sitters and clients and the trust that's placed in these people, you sort of quickly understand that can be very easily exploited. And that's one of the reasons why one of my bugaboos, one of my pet peeves is psychics and psychic detectives. Not because I hate the idea of psychic powers. I mean, that'd be great if they existed, but because it's so easy to exploit people who are grieving and people who are genuinely frightened and scared by giving them some story about how, if bad things are happening to you, it's because some enemy has gone out of their way to magically harm you. And just while I'm on the topic, let me just throw in a quick plug for my podcast, Squaring the Strange, which this is now in our 3rd year. The anniversary is actually April Fool's. So we didn't plan it that way. It just happens. But in the next episode, in fact, I think it's coming out tomorrow night. We have an interview with my friend in Nigeria, Leo Igwe. And many of you have seen Leo's work, and he works in West Africa, and he is prominent in the fight against witchcraft beliefs in West Africa and primarily Nigeria, because what's happened there, and again, the interview will be out probably tomorrow night, and you can hear his whole story on it, is that he's helping victims of people, mostly women, who have been accused of witchcraft. And even though here in America, we tend to think of witchcraft accusations and beliefs being relegated to the 1700s in Salem and elsewhere, in many places in the world, these are genuinely harmful beliefs. There are many places in the world, I've written about them, in Brazil, in Costa Rica, in South Africa, in West Africa, and elsewhere, India, Pakistan. There are people who have been attacked, beaten, sometimes burned to death and killed because somebody in the community is whispering rumors about how this person is a witch. So these things happen to this day. I mean, as recently as a couple of weeks ago. And that's one of the reasons why I'm especially passionate about trying to contain and to address harmful rumors and conspiracies and things, particularly about witchcraft and curses. Anyway, so getting back to this woman. So again, she had and this was all done in an email correspondence. So I didn't speak to her on the phone. She emailed me. I tried to figure out how do I reply back to her. And again, I don't have time to do the whole thing. And what I did in the piece, in the column, is that I replied to her and then I annotated it. So I wrote out my reply to the woman, I forgot her name, I think it was Rachel or something, Chelsea. And then in addition to that, in the text, I said, this is why I approach it this way. So for example, I began by saying, thanks for reaching out to me. You did the right thing. I am an expert on these things, because I was trying to establish the fact that I could help her, right? If I was modest and saying, oh, I don't know anything about that, I can't help you, that's not what I do, she's not going to be helped by that. She's not, I'll be one more person that didn't reach out. And so I carefully crafted it so that I was being respectful of her and diplomatic, and also trying to steer her towards critical thinking, steer her towards avoiding magical thinking. So for example, one of the comments I made in my reply to her was, I said, my advice is to stop going to psychics. And the reason was, and it was beautiful because I pulled it right from her email to me. I said, you told me you've already been to 10 or 12 psychics. They didn't help, right? You're still cursed, right? You're still frightened. You're still not sleeping. You're still. So I said, whether the psychics are real or not, whatever they were trying to do, we can both agree that they didn't help. And in fact, if anything, they made it worse. And so when I replied to her, I didn't begin by saying, well, psychics are bullshit. I said, I don't know your situation. I didn't speak to the people you did, but just from my perspective, I think we can both agree that whatever you're doing before, including talking to psychics, by definition didn't help because you're coming to me. So my advice is to do that anyway. So in the course of addressing her concerns, I try to leave the door open for her beliefs in some sort of magical thinking, right? I didn't want to close the door totally and shut her down, because then she wouldn't have accepted me as an authority that could potentially help her. So anyway, I went through the thing, and I said, there's different ways you can do this. And so I brought in critical thinking, I brought in media literacy, I brought in psychology, and I tried to steer her towards saying, for example, at one point she said that it seemed like every I think it was every 24, 48 hours, something bad happened. And I said, Chelsea, bad things happen to all of us. I mean, this is not a curse. in literally everyone's lives, something bad will happen. And if you perceive, if you intuit or you superimpose patterns on it, then yeah, if you think back, wow, 24 hours ago, this bad thing happened. And I stubbed my toe, or I got in a car accident, or a friend of mine had something bad happen. So once you start looking for these things, it's, what in psychology we call confirmation bias or priming, then you can go back and you can find patterns that aren't actually there. And so I was trying to nudge her towards that. And I said, there's nothing magical about this time period. I said, don't worry about that. If you focus, if it's in your head that every 24 hours something bad's going to happen, then you're just going to be waiting, fearful, watching the clock, wondering what bad thing is going to happen, tomorrow morning around noon. So I said, there's nothing. I said, just don't pay less and less attention to it, and as the days go on, you'll find it's happening less and less frequently. So I tried to really thread the needle between trying to help her, but not unduly reinforce her beliefs. And I'm pleased to say that that I actually got a response from her. Normally I don't. A lot, as you can imagine, a lot of times when people reach out to me, ask me about some topic that I've investigated, oftentimes I'm not telling them what they want to hear. Right? They want me to tell them, oh, that's clearly a ghost in your photograph, or they want me to tell them, astral. I had somebody contact me earlier this week asking me about astral projection, and when they have experiences and they believe they leave their body and whatever else. And so oftentimes when people ask me about these topics, again, the answers I give them are diplomatic and skeptical and science-based, and a lot of times that's not the answer they were wanting to hear. And so they either tell me to screw off, or they send me hate mail. By the way, if you haven't checked out the podcast, just as one last shameless plug, we actually read my hate mail on the show. And I have a friend of mine who's a comic in LA, and he reads my hate mail as like William Shatner, I think Trump, there was a Christopher Walken. He does a really great, like, Ben's hate mail as read by Christopher Walken. Anyway, so check that out. So anyway, I was pleased to see that Chelsea did write back to me, and she actually thanked me. She says, you've really helped me. Thank you. I'm feeling better already. So I never heard back. That was, it's been probably 5 or 6 years now. I never really followed up, but at least the one response I did get back from her was her saying that it did help her, and I was really gratified about that. Another topic that I researched was eHarmony. Just to totally shift gears, I wrote a column. Somebody wrote in asking, is eHarmony scientific? And I said, well, that's a fair question. I have a pretty good grasp of science, and I can read journal articles. And so I did some researching, and I didn't find any evidence that eHarmony is scientific. And so I reached out to the company, and I had an email back and forth over the course of, I think, 2 weeks. Again, it's in the book that's all, basically I reached out to the chief data scientist and said, hey, I'm a researcher. I'm trying to figure out if there's scientific validity to eHarmony's claims about unusually good matching between, of course, singles online, men and women, and their matching algorithms, proprietary and all. And again, I won't spoil it, but basically he said, oh yes, absolutely. So he sent me this data dump, right? He sent me this 8-page email and 6 attachments. He said, absolutely, here's all your evidence. I'm like, all right, thank you. So I start reading it. I'm like, okay, well, this is all boilerplate PR stuff from the website, clearly, because it says you'll link here. So I'm like, there's nothing here. So I went to the journal articles, and I think he sent me 4 of them. And I'm like, okay, well, here's the evidence. Nothing there. 2 of the articles had no relevance to what I'd asked. Another one was on something, and it basically was so general. It basically just said that people who are matched by interest are more likely to have longer relationships than those who aren't. Yeah. Yeah. In general, if you have people who are matched by interest, by definition, they will probably have more in common than people who aren't. And so I wrote back. I said, this is not what I asked for. I know how to read a journal article. I don't know if you thought that you were sending me something, but I'll ask again. What evidence do you have published in peer-reviewed journal articles that eHarmony's proprietary matching system is effective? And he wrote back and basically said, I don't like your tone. And I wrote back and said, screw off. Anyway, it ended up with some hurt feelings, mostly on his side. So I actually felt validated, because a couple of years later, eHarmony was actually busted in the UK for making false claims to scientific legitimacy in their advertisements. So again, going from curses to eHarmony. And then there was another example. One of my favorites was also about elves in Iceland. So do you guys remember the story about this is probably maybe 10 years or so ago, about a road that was being constructed outside of Reykjavik that was stopped because Austin is nodding his head. Okay, all right. So anybody else remember that one? It's a great story. Come on, guys. All right. So here's the story. So somebody contacted me saying, is it true that elves are stopping road construction in Iceland? I'm like, well, that sounds weird, but I mean, I love folklore. That's my groove. So I looked into it, and sure enough, it was generally true. So there was a whole story about, of course, it's a little more complicated than that. It is big if true, if you will. So the story is that yes, indeed, there was a highway being plowed through a lava field, and if you've been to Iceland, a good chunk of Iceland is lava fields, just because of the geology of the place. And this particular lava field was being stopped in its tracks by protesters. And among those protesters, not entirely, but among the people protesting this road going through outside of Reykjavik, were people who were protesting because they believed that the road would disrupt what was called an elf church. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with how religious elves are. in Iceland, but this is not a literal church. So basically, the idea of a church is, how do I put this delicately? A really big rock. I'm not being sarcastic. I mean, it's a giant lava rock, and it's colloquially called the Elf Church or Elf House, if you will, Elf Apartment. I don't know what apartment number it is. I don't know if there's a buzzer. I don't really know how that works. They didn't explain that, but so the many of the protesters were saying, you can't go through here. You're going to disrupt the elves. And of course, I'm loving this because, you know, there's a whole tradition of in folklore of not disrupting the elves, right? You look at the British fairies, for example, perfect example, right? The fairies, the Disney version of fairies, such as Tinkerbell, are nothing like the original fairies. The original fairies in British folklore are assholes. They are nasty. They will kill you. They have no compunctions. They're not cute and flitting around with glitter. The elves in British folklore and fairies, they're sort of version of the same thing. They will lead you astray. They will be more than happy to lead you to your doom. You don't mess with the fairies. In fact, that's one reason why in many places there's actually a taboo against naming them. So you don't call them fairies. You call them the fine folk, for example, or the wee folk, or them. So there's this whole taboo, even just against saying the name fairy, lest you anger them and they do something bad to you. And there's different versions of fairies across around the world, and I give a couple of examples in the book. But anyway, so I was just this fit in perfectly. This road being stopped by elves in Iceland fit in perfectly with that whole tradition. So I was just fascinated by this. And unfortunately, I couldn't go to Reykjavik at the time. I was doing other things, non-fairy related. But my father, actually, by happenstance, happened to be in Iceland and Reykjavik at the time this protest was going on. And he and his lady friend, Carol, interviewed some of the people who were protesting the roads, and they have photos and whatever else. And a couple of my dad's photos are in the book, which is kind of cool. So at the time, I was trying to I think I was writing a piece for Discovery News, but I was trying to sort of pull it together and figure out what's actually going on here. So the short answer is that yes, there were people that were trying to keep the road from being built on the premise that it was going to disrupt the ferries, but that was only one part of a broader ecological protest. So it's in other ways, it was very similar to, for example, the attempts to stop the Dakota oil pipeline or strip mining here in New Mexico or what have you. So it's another flavor of that. And I'll tell you a quick follow-up to this story. So yeah, I wrote about that. The road did eventually go through, but I never heard any more about the Elf Church. It was, I mean, I saw the news, road goes through, and I was coming back from Belgium. This is a couple years back. I was giving a talk at a folklore conference in Brussels. On the way back, I had a stopover in Iceland, and it was, the stopover was only like 18 hours or 24 hours, so it was just barely enough time to sort of sit down. So I didn't have time to go into the wilds and anything else. So I had to more or less stay around Reykjavik because I didn't have time to go anywhere else. But while I was there, I figured, well, what am I going to do kicking around Reykjavik for a day or whatever? And I said, well, whatever happened to that Elf Church? Because I wrote about it and I was always interested in the story. And so I started asking around. I was like, yeah, well, I want to go see this Elf Church. And all the locals were like, oh, yeah, we don't know where it is. I'm like, it was making international news. How do you not know where this thing is? Like, I was writing about it in New Mexico. And to be fair, I think it was 3 or 4 years earlier. But anyway, but I mean, they remembered the story. They remembered the road going through, and I mean, they remembered but nobody there, as far as I could tell, knew what had ever happened to the Elf Church. Was it moved? Was it destroyed? And so I started asking around, and not speaking in the Icelandic, I really couldn't do too many internet searches for it. But thankfully, one of the hotel clerks was intrigued by my interest in the whole thing. I mean, he was like, okay, you seem very excited about this, sir. I got nothing else to do. Land of the Midnight Sun. So let's do this. So I'll spare the details, but I ended up going to the lava fields twice, actually. Once looking for it, didn't find it. I went back dejected. I did a little more research, and then I thought I had a good clue to where it was. And I hiked around lava fields for about 7 or 8 hours. And I finally found it, and I'm kind of proud of myself for finding it. It was not well marked. It's very well hidden, as you might expect an elf church to be. Anyway, in the photo, I have myself with the elf church. So that's one story. I'll tell you one other quick one, which is about hypnotist thieves. So again, people contact me with weird questions all the time. That's kind of what I do, right? I did a book on the Chupacabra, so that means that once or twice a month, somebody sends me a photo of a hairless dog and says, so I was driving home and I saw this by the side of the road. Is this a Chupacabra? I'm like, no, that's a mangy dog, but thank you for sending that to me. I'll add it to my Chupacabra file. So again, I'm the guy, anytime there's some weird thing, I get sent, which is fine. It's what I do. In this case, somebody sent me a clipping from a UK tabloid. Now, when someone sends you a clipping from a UK tabloid, that by itself is a red flag, right? It's like, oh, here's an article from the Sun. I'm like, okay, you know what the Sun is, right? The Sun is the one that reported that, that Princess Di was kidnapped by aliens. So doesn't mean it's all garbage, but so obviously the tabloids are not the most reliable. So anyway, so he sent this to me, and anytime someone sends me a link to a tabloid, my first thing is I begin looking for non-tabloid sources. So I research the guy's name, the person, whatever incident happened, and I try to get something other than some tabloid writer who's telling the story. Anyway, in this case, there was a London shopkeeper that was allegedly robbed by hypnosis, which I thought was, again, interesting, big if true, if you will. And, having background in psychology, hypnosis is a real thing. It's not what most people sort of picture it to be. It's not stage hypnosis. It's not, the Svengali carrying slinging a watch around. So there are versions of hypnosis, but it's not the popular conception of what most people think it is. And so I was initially skeptical that somebody had robbed somebody of hypnosis, using hypnosis. So I began doing basically literature review. And I found about another half dozen cases where that was also claimed to have happened, primarily in Europe, where some woman says, yeah, I was walking home, and then next thing I know, I was hypnotized and I woke up in my own house with all my stuff gone. Okay, well, that's weird. Anyway, so I dug into it, and there's actually videotape of this. There's a surveillance camera footage of, it's not really great quality, but you can see what's going on. So there's a shopkeeper in a small basically a corner store in London, and this guy walks in and taps him on the shoulder, and he just sort of stops. And then the guy reaches around and picks his pocket and walks out, and there's no real reaction. And you can't see the person's front; you can only see it from the back, and it's kind of blurry, and the frame rate isn't very good, but you can generally tell what's going on. So it is odd, So anyway, so when interviewed, the guy claimed that he was just sitting there, by himself in the store. I think it was late at night, and this guy comes in and talked to him for a second, tapped him on the shoulder, and then he said he felt paralyzed or something, and the guy just walked off with his wallet. And that didn't seem likely to me. I mean, doesn't mean it didn't happen, but it just seemed odd the way that he was talking about. And so I know that the tapping on the shoulder is a common pickpocket technique, right? Because you want to distract the person's attention. So, you don't say, "Where's your wallet?" You say, "Can I see your watch?" Or you spill something on them, mustard or ketchup or something, so their attention is on their sleeve or on their pants, and they're not looking to where their wallet is. So my best guess was that it was basically an otherwise ordinary pickpocketing event that, for whatever reason, was sort of spun by the tabloids into a hypnosis thievery type thing. So anyway, that's just a couple of the stories. Again, I cover 70 of them, from crop circles to reincarnation to lots of health claims. I was actually surprised at how many health claims I ended up investigating. Mothman, Chupacabra's in there, of course, some ghost photos and things like that. So I've been babbling on for about 40 minutes, so I will take questions and comments and criticisms. Can't hear you. Donuts! I think you muted, Dave.
Yeah, there we
There you
go.
go.
First, we'll have our skeptical donut and a virtual donut there. Oh, okay.
That looks delicious. That, of course,
Okay.
reminds me of one of my favorite investigations, the Chemo Theater Ghost here in Albuquerque, where
Excellent.
the boy ghost, as you guys know, because I gave you guys a talk about it, was said to eat donuts. And I've always wondered, how does the ghost eat donuts anyway? I mean, how, just from a practical standpoint, that seems sketchy to me, but whatever.
Okay. So yeah, let's let loose with questions. I'll just start with are any of those about events in New Mexico besides, of course, the chemo?
That is a good question. Now, I did write a book titled "Mysterious New Mexico," which is just about
That's true. Yeah.
just about stuff. Let me sort of skim through here. There's a handful of them. There's a Chupacabra one, a couple ghost stories. Most of these, reincarnation. Most of these are not New Mexico based per se. There's a couple that have tie-ins. Yeah.
All right.
So, any questions about any of the investigations I mentioned before, or anything else? Have I sated your curiosity?
Ben,
Hey, John.
hey, if New Mexico has the Taos hum, does the Elf Rock or whatever you call that thing have an Elf Rock hum? And did you hear such a thing when you were there?
The Elf Church? No. It was no. There are the Taos hum is only one of several hums. There's one at Zug Island, I think, near Detroit. There are a couple other mysterious hums around. Taos is the most famous one. Hey, Davina. So no, in the case of the Elf Church, it was actually kind of interesting because, given the respect that the Elf Church had generated and all the interest, I had assumed that there would be tourists there and signs and something. I mean, just it was such a well-known thing, and it had made international news. I had going into it assuming that there would be, that the locals would have made it into a tourist thing, but there was exactly the opposite. I mean, it was very hard for me to find. I eventually found it, but it was not. I mean, it was hidden and was remained hidden, but there was no markings on it at all. There was some trash that I respectfully picked up and took with me, and I did leave a 5 krona coin as a little supplication to the elves. So I don't know if they appreciate it or not, but
I think you need to send somebody from Roswell over there to teach them a little something about economics.
Well, yeah, you would think. Certainly Inverness in Scotland has done well capitalizing on Nessie. Port Henry in New York is the home of Champ, the Lake Champlain monster, allegedly. Roswell is, of course, the big money maker, when you have the weather balloon crash there in 47. And of course, Dave's done enormous work on the Roswell story and those as well. And Dave, why don't you mention for a second about Aztec's attempts at cashing in on their crash?
So yeah, here in Socorro, we've got one of the best incidents of all time, but it never was exploited. I don't really think it was a hoax with the mayor and Lonnie Zamora and all that.
The Socorro UFO crash. Yeah.
The Socorro crash, yeah. But there's just a pile of rocks down there by the Arby's.
See, Dave, a pile of rocks by the Arby's is not going to bring people in. You gotta sell
the Discovery Channel was here. I filmed with them. They were out here looking at Socorro because Roswell is pretty much old hat anymore. So yeah, and they wanted the skeptical side of things. So there you go. That'll be next spring. But Aztec, so they had a couple of grifters, con men that had doodle bugs, devices that would help them sell steaks and oil or natural gas or what have you. So these doodle bugs were devices that made it look like, yeah, here there's oil or gold or what have you, and they would sign up these poor victims to pay maybe $50,000 for these gadgets that ended up doing nothing.
Well, and of course the gadgets were allegedly based on alien technology.
Well, they started with regular gadgets and then they moved to alien technology probably after Roswell, and they thought, wow, if we had alien technology, that would make this thing sizzle.
If you can't sell alien technology,
so they conned a Hollywood writer whose name was
Scully. Frank Scully.
It was Scully.
Mm-hmm.
And they sort of talked him into writing a sensational novel about flying saucers, America's first flying saucer tabloid novel. And that featured a couple of scientists who had this top science scoop of this alien invasion and the Venusians and the 100-foot craft, 99.99 feet, I should say. And,
not 100 feet. That'd be too easy.
So, and it turned out that those were the con men, Irving Newton and Dr. G, who was so Dr. G turned out to be a guy who worked at a parts store, like AutoZone, and he wasn't a top secret, magnet scientist at the labs or what have you. And Newton, Silas Newton, was quite the conniver. So they would hook these people into these elaborate plots, have them shell out tens of thousands of dollars. And then what tripped them up was True magazine. J.P. Kahn, a writer with True, got wind of it, and this was big, if true. Venus, wow, that's it right there. So J.P. Kahn, went and interviewed the guys, Newton and Dr. Gebauer, or Leo Gebauer, and he even did a magic trick, and he swapped a piece of the alien spaceship with just a aluminum plug, and he took the alien fragment to Stanford Research Institute, had them test it, and they came back and said, oh yeah, that's aluminum. That's not just aluminum, it's type 25 pots and pans aluminum. And
so we know that people on Venus use the same aluminum pans that we use.
Absolutely,
this is big if true.
The same alloy grade, yeah. So J.P. Kahn just tore them up. He wrote this, maybe 30-page article, which I left at the library in Aztec to help the people there. So Aztec, in I think it's around 2000 maybe. They wanted to catch up to Roswell, so they started having their own Aztec Ufo Festival, and the library organized it. And at first, there's some skeptics. They had me there talking about their con men, and they had some of the true believers. Stanton Friedman, the late Stanton Friedman, who was a big Roswell pro Roswell believer. He was against Aztec. He said, Aztec, oh, come on, don't waste my time. But then
That's bullshit. The other stuff over
he
here,
he
that's
came
right.
around to Aztec. They got to Stanton Friedman, and he became a believer.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, but this conference, well, they had the Aztec UFO Festival for about 12 years, maybe 14. And then about 2014, I think it went the way of the dodo. And what happened, I think, was it became just sort of a gathering place for just, you want weird that makes the weekly world news look normal. We've got it for you right here at Aztec. And it just got too weird. And the library said, fold, we're out. And that
Too
was
weird for Aztec, but of course they just went to Roswell, so they're like,
oh yeah,
go show your alien implants down in Roswell.
there, and I'm sure they did. So that's the story of Aztec. It came and went. But what I remember as I was talking there back in 2000 was an old timer, really old lady, stood up and said, I was here in 1948, and I'm sure I would have remembered a spaceship.
Yeah, fair enough. Yes, you would have. Yeah.
Yep. So there you have it.
The hubbub.
So hey, I had a question.
Yes.
You have something in your book about subliminal advertising.
I do. Yes.
What you got?
Yeah. So, again, going back to psychology and media literacy, sort of, things in my wheelhouse. So I've always been interested in the claims about subliminal advertising, and the story actually came up is a friend of my father's forwarded to me an email that had been sent to her complaining about subliminal advertising that she'd seen for Trump. This is 2 years ago, and she was convinced, absolutely convinced, that that she had seen the word Trump flash on the screen, and that this was some part of a nefarious scheme. And I said, I've looked into subliminal advertising, and it doesn't really work, and it's never worked. And again, it's sort of a long story, but basically the idea behind subliminal advertising began, as many of these things do, as a hoax. There was a guy who had I think his name was Cantrell, who had basically an advertising guy who had made up this story that he had, in a theater, he had shown the word drink Coke, or the phrase drink Coke, and eat popcorn, and that shortly afterwards the concession stand, the sales went through the roof. And this spurred a lot of, I think this was in the mid 50s, if I'm not mistaken, 52, 53. And at the time, there was lots of concerns about not just the Cold War, but also different mass media and influence and things like that. And so this made huge news because people were like, oh my God, how are they manipulating us? And so it became this whole story about subliminal advertising. And then a guy, Brian Wilson Key, wrote an article called Subliminal Seduction, in which he showed photographs of ice cubes and clouds, and said, do you see the hidden figures here? And again, this is classic psychology, right? If you suggest to somebody what they'll see, it's the same with a ghost photo. Someone says, oh, I took this ghost photo. Do you see the face and the head and the arm? Like, not really. You're seeing that, doesn't mean it's in there. So anyway, it's the same principle. Yeah. So anyway, so that was it later turned out the guy admitted that he made the whole thing up. It was not a study. The whole thing was faked. But by this time, the general public's fear of subliminal advertising cemented it. And so this is why to this day people are frightened by subliminal advertising. They think it's this sort of subliminal mind control thing. And subliminal images is certainly real, and you can have subliminal processing, but it it's not, but advertising doesn't really work that way. You can't just show somebody an image of a Coke can and make them want to go buy Coke. Filmmakers, for example, use subliminal images all the time. In the movie Psycho, for example, and also The Exorcist, there's freeze frames of skulls that you just see it just for a blink of an eye, and then it's gone. It's just one more technique, but it's not. There's nothing nefarious. There's nothing particularly powerful about it. And if you talk to advertisers, in fact, I think I quote Bob Garfield in the book. He says it's hard enough to get people to pay attention to advertisements, on screens, in magazines, on TV, much less getting someone to see something in a split second. That's just not how that's not human perception works. So that was the piece on subliminal advertising there.
That's a good point. My thought about that is advertisers that basically use subliminal advertising by putting way too much text in their road signs. So I think one of the classics is in Belen, as you're heading north on the freeway by Belen. There's this sign that has the 10 attractions of Belen, and they're all in tiny print. And there's no way that you could read that at 75 miles per hour. So I got a picture of it when I was a passenger with my zoom camera, and I blew that up, and finally I could, for the first time, figure out what the city of Belen wanted me to know. But that is, and you see it a lot. It's like basic psychology. These signs, you've got to be able to read them in the few milliseconds that you're passing by. So they can't go on and on. They can't be overly detailed.
Yeah.
So,
if you can't process it, then it doesn't matter whether you've seen it or not, because you're not going to know what the hell it was.
So if subliminal advertising was real, I should just see that thing as I drive by Belen and immediately remember the railroads and the Harvey House and all that stuff. I should just have it right there. But it doesn't happen.
Good point.
All right. Anybody else got something for Ben here?
All right. Any other comments, criticisms? I'll take what I get. Crystal skull.
Oh, skull. Excellent.
Chupacabra. This is all right. It's showtime. Chupacabra. This is actually the very first Chupacabra figure I ever bought on eBay about 15 years ago for like $20.
Nice.
And of course, my book, Bad Clowns. Evil Clowns. There you go. That's all the show and tell I got for now. Sorry, I'm out.
Have you seen the new It by Stephen King? They made a new dramatization.
The two-parter that came out last year, or more recent?
Yeah, no, last year I think.
I did see that. Of course, Pennywise is sort of the classic evil clown for people of a certain generation. The reason it's kind of interesting, just real quick, the reason that Pennywise is so well known is that it aired on TV. It was a two-part miniseries in 1990. So had it been a theatrical release, it's likely that fewer people would have heard about it, because it wasn't in living rooms across the country. And plus, it probably would have been rated, R, PG-13, so it would have cut down the audience. So it's kind of ironic that I think it was Tim Curry's Pennywise became such an iconic evil clown for a certain generation.
Good point.
All right, I have nothing else to say. I know that's hard to believe.
I just have one more question. So you've got an Elvis sighting in 1990?
Yes. Yeah. So there's a quick fun story about that. So again, another example of somebody that contacted me saying, "Hey, what do you know about Elvis?" I'm like, "Not much. I mean, I know who he is. Honestly, I prefer Elvis Costello. No offense to any Elvis fans, and he said, "Well, do you know he's in Home Alone?" I was like, "I did not know that, and I'm skeptical, but I will look into it." So sure enough, there you go online, Elvis Home Alone, and there's this huge thing about Home Alone, about how in this one scene report, behind Maura from Schitt's Creek, I'm forgetting her name. There's a guy in a mustache and beard, in the sort of near background actor who some people claim is Elvis. And so this guy wrote to me and said, I'm pretty sure it's Elvis. Can you look into it? I'm like, I guess. He's like, oh well, I'm sure about it. I researched it with YouTube videos. I'm like, no, you didn't. You did not research this with YouTube videos. You watched a bunch of YouTube videos and then you emailed me about it. You didn't research this shit. Anyway, so I'm like, all right, fine. So I went back and forth with the guy. I said, it's an interesting idea. Again, sort of diplomacy and respect. Why do you think this is Elvis? Why would this be Elvis? Why would he still be alive in 1990? And of all places, as a background actor in Home Alone. I mean, what series of events makes you think this is plausible? I phrased it somewhat more diplomatically. He didn't really answer. He sort of went back and like, well, I have this sense. I'm like, okay. Anyway, long story short, I did not end up identifying the background actor. I said, it could be Elvis. I don't think it is. There's no reason to think it is. If you genuinely think this is him, then if you think the lack of information about this one particular background actor is unique or suspicious, then my advice to you, sort of telling him how he could investigate it, would be, I would say, see how many other background actors you can identify from 1990 in this scene. So you say, well, I've looked into it, I can't find his name. Well, what about the guy behind him? Can you find his name? Did you even look? Because that would be a big. So anyway, I did not end up solving that mystery, but I did end up just sort of leading him towards it. And frankly, I didn't have time to dig into it. So that was the end of that. And then about a couple weeks later on my podcast, Squaring the Strange, I mentioned it. And there's a friend of mine, Kenny Biddle, who's another investigator. And I mentioned this mystery and I said, I wonder if Kenny can solve it. And sort of challenging him, and then like a week later, like, got it, bitch. I'm like, all right, fine. So Kenny's like, yeah, I figured this one out. I'm like, all right, Kenny. So to his credit, and he is credited in the book, Kenny tracked down the background actor mistaken for Elvis in that scene.
Impressive.
He's very pleased with himself, and I give him a pat on the back. So.
All righty. Well, thanks, Ben. Unless anybody else has another question, I think we're going to let you go. Fine talk. Hey, Ben, tell everybody where to get your book.
Oh, you mean this book right here? Right here?
That one right there. Yeah.
It is available in paperback and on Kindle. I myself am I'm a hard copy guy, as you may notice behind me, but it is available on Kindle for those who don't like it. I was offering the first 50 signed and limited edition. I think I have like 3 left. So if you want one, tell me now. Other than that, they're available. I always encourage people, of course, to, if you can, go to your local independent bookstore. That's not always possible, but it's available here and there.
Great. All righty.
And thank you all for paying attention and not booing me, at least not out loud.
Oh,
thank you.
Talk. All righty. So don't forget Larry Barker on Christmas Eve. That should be fun. And have a good holiday, everybody. And we'll see you back here in January, perhaps.
Stay safe, everybody.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Vaccinate.
Yeah. Soon as it's allowed. Got to let the care providers get a shot. Okay. Thanks, Ben. All righty. Take care, everybody. I'm gonna pull the plug. Have a good one.